This narrative, like startup culture, is very attractive to individuals. We strongly encourage individuals to get into the startup without any so serious considerations about predictable harm or some kind of things. To prevent that practical huge harm for individuals, we strongly propose this motion. So before moving on my argument, several models here. Firstly, how this narrative will prevail in the society. We mean that the media or some book will broadcast success of startup sensationally. Some media will focus on some particular individuals who successfully build up the startup and gain so huge amount of money, and just focus on some attractiveness of the success of the startup culture. And after prevailing, second model, after prevailing that narrative startup is very attractive, the narrative will say, so you can also do it. That you can also these things are also applicable to your individuals. So you can start. So you should start up to become such kind of successful persons. And thirdly, the preemptions, opposition side might say that such possibility of creation of the startup itself will completely disappear on the side of the house. However, it is not true, because the certain amount of people who have sufficient ability to successfully build up the startup will exist, like Mark Zuckerberg or some kind of things. Such people will get into startup without any swaying this by the narrative. So the certain amount of the startup will also exist on both sides of the house. Okay, move on to my argument. Well, Prime Minister, two issues here. Firstly, how the narrative force and encourage the individual to get into the startup, then how that is crucially harmful to individual. Secondly, conversely, what kind of the narrative the government we should support. Okay, so move on to my first issues about how this narrative encourages individuals. Okay. Two reasons. Firstly, that given that characterization of the persons who will be strongly swayed by this narrative. Two characterizations here. Firstly, basically that is those who are easily swayed and get into the startup must be for the most part young people, comparatively. So that people because they don't have social experience in actually they don't engage with some particular job or some kind of things. Because of the lackiness of their social experience, they don't know how the reality is serious, and they don't know how the successful of the startup is so limited case in the society. So they don't consider that point. And second analysis is that who don't sway as I engage in the preemptions, characterization, who will successfully succeed to building starting up startup itself. That people intelligent people will without any dominant without this narrative, they will beforehand build up the plan how they get into the startup and to succeed in that startup. What is the requirement to succeed that point? Because that people will so seriously consider that point, and what is the requirement and what is a predictable problem, the individual will succeed the startup. Okay. Second reasons is that second reasons how this narrative will encourage individuals is that the media, as I said in the model, the media will also sensationally broadcast how attractive the startup is if the individual successfully start up, and So because of that, like broadcasting the individual's misunderstanding, that is also only always hulu with attractiveness. And what did happen? Because the media only focusing on emphasize on the attractiveness of the startup, the individuals will more likely to overlook the predictable practical harm. So, an impact of this. Two impacts. Firstly, even though the choice regarding jobs in the future of individuals is crucially important for individuals because they always face such a job and always consider, and that is a primary source of the happiness of individuals, given that gaining money or some self-actualization or some kind of things. If the individuals get into without some serious consideration about the future job, if they fail to successfully get into the startup, they just seriously regret, and they don't regret, and why get into the startup, we don't actually gain some practical social skill, just we fail, and just leads to the liberation of the individuals. Second impact is that even if the individual successfully start up, the burden coming from the startup is hugely so huge burden will be imposed on the individuals. So actually, when get into the startup, the individual will always sacrifice their time. Sometimes they sacrifice the relationship with their friends or family, and however they don't concede. However, they don't consider that point because that they swayed by the narrative. They just sway without any considerations. For that reasons that For the reasons, the burden is not predictable for the particular individuals. That is crucially harmful to individuals because that is not based on the concept. Okay, let's move on. Move on to the second point briefly. What kind of a narrative we should support? Just my partner will explain. You should see reality, consider all the factors predictable. That is more. It is better for the individual to pursue for the happiness of the individual. For that reason, propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your speech. Now. Now I'd like to call for Leader of Opposition. Here.
In the movie Steve Jobs goes off with John Scully and asks a question. Do you want to change the world? Or do you want to spend your whole life selling the sugar cola? Basically, just because such dramatic line was appeared in the globalization of the movie, in those stories of Steve Jobs, their bibliography, suddenly, it doesn't really make the Pepsi Cola employee to suddenly get out of their work buildings, get out of their occupations, and start finding jobs that can really change the world. Because those who are actually capable of being in those jobs and being in those domain of the business, still be aware of side effects of what the venture business have, and still knows how it is actually be challenging, how it is actually also great worthy for themselves to be in such traditional path. We don't really believe that this globalization actually accounts to every individual in our society, to every student and their business. We believe that the major stakeholders of this process is about those who are actually in those business fields, who are actually in a choice of whether to take the traditional path or whether to take the venture business. That's basically the major stakeholder that we would like to analyze on today's debate. And that's the first principle that we want to produce. Why the people will not make a sudden or impartial choices just because the globalization happens in today's society. As we clearly analyze, those people in that venture business are aware of those fields, are aware of the side effects. Although we do acknowledge the point that there are the global advantages of venture business, but still, there are side effects. But the thing is that if the people who are in such fields they actually have a sufficient amount of information to whether they know how the contemporary society are structuralized and how venture business are operated in the first place, which is basically the reason why the globalization would not going to sway them effectively so strongly that they will actually think that they should go out of the business right now and to go for a venture business. That's a clear discrepancy of what they want, what the government would like to depict on today's debate. The partial or sudden decision made by impartial and very stupid individuals are not the clear senses that we're willing to take on today's debate. Whether we clearly believe that those people are actually smart enough and has actually an information substantial enough to regard whether this is really great worthy for them or not. We basically think that is why the individuals will not take an impartial and sudden decision in the first place. Moving on, and I think basically my argument is the combination of the engagement to the open government. Basically, as a leader of opposition, I would like to first provide a principle and going to explicitly explain what are the exclusive features of this globalization itself, and going to move on and what practical analysis people still have due benefits but not actually have a disincentive with this globalization. We believe that exclusive features of globalization, although it tends to have a connotation that it might indirectly just give a negative depiction of those contemporary business and conventional path, it does not indirectly gives you why the globalization is always better than those traditional path. We believe that in the jobs, which is about a bibliography of the stories, we still give you how the Wozniak, although went out of the banking business with his Apple, still have succeeded by their own stories, still succeeded by their unconventional path, which is basic reason we're not actually negatively depicting the conventional path itself, but just giving a why, how, and specifically the Steve Jobs succeeded in their stories, which is just simply saying how depiction of the positive of the globalization, not a negative and a connotation to those contemporary business. We really this clearly gives the people, the audiences, which are clearly enough of the awareness that you can succeed at Steve Jobs, but you can still fail, or you can still succeed in the traditional path, which is not basically reason why those exclusive features of negativism toward the contemporary business will going to happen in our policy and the globalization itself. We believe that it also gives people information of how you can really succeed and how are the things, because it only does not give you information how they succeeded, but how they overcame the failures in their businesses. It actually gives people a connotation. How can you really break through the situation that you go with your business? When Steve Jobs actually failed with Macintosh, the movie actually clearly identifies how he actually overcame the psychological and those tendencies that he had by owning himself, and how he can really cope with such problems by engaging in cooperation with your teammates. That's basically showing you a clear way how you can really develop from learning from the failure, which is actually making those people to be more not prone to be the failures in their life, which are the basic reason, because it does not actually gives out people to just move away from the failure, move away from the business, but still gives the people how you can really overcome those failures by the practical cases that are already clearly proven. We believe that movies and the books should be a globalization actor and are a legitimate actor because they are the most persuasive actor. But we don't really believe that they are the exclusive information source in contemporary society, because there are internet sites, there are companies who actually analyzes the good points and the bad points of the venture business to actually make people decide to have rational choices. We believe that existence of alternative, that existence of those alternative resources does not sway over people from dramatically, but still can have an objective point of view. The reason why still we need those globalization itself is, as I experienced, it's the most persuasive way. When people are actually in a way to just discovering whether venture business would be good for them or not, the biggest reason that you can actually go for them is you don't really just go into every sources, but you actually see those movies, depiction, which is clearly made by those practical cases of the venture business who had succeeded. We don't really believe that this is a conclusive way that you can actually end up with your decision, but a clear way that you can opt out those people from not having an interest in the venture business. We believe this is a clear start, initial start, which can make people to clearly have an initial interest to be started. And that's the way that people actually are being incentivized to venture business at the first place, whereas they can go through the processes of whether deciding not to do or not in a more specific process, and in the after measure, as we have clearly explained, how the presence of the alternative will going to compensate for that. We believe that process still gives an interest to the people of the venture business itself, but clearly gives how the objectiveness and how the swayed decision will not actually be guaranteed what the government would like to make. We believe that's a clear way how you can actually have a practical benefits and practical opting out the initial start of the individuals who may have interest in the venture business. We believe that actually practical analysis actually leads to the fact that why itself is a principally the venture business itself is so important. Because itself in principally to prove it. We believe that although in contemporary society, venture business may be prevalent, and those like Steve Jobs days, or the 1980s, 1970s, those were the start of the venture business, where people still were feared about the starting the business in the first place. We believe that globalization of one's success actually gives a people an image that you can also opt out from like venture business that actually leads to new and like novice developments that cannot be elsewhere made. You may think that those like big companies are more good and more incentivized to make those like products, but we believe that it still gives incentives to make such new products by the venture business itself, and in the venture business you can cooperate with those big companies and in a way that actually incentivizes society as a result. We believe that this actually clearly gives experiences for individuals to be more incentivized in their further career, because although you may fail, you still have a specifics about like startup. You may actually like independently make something out, which is all the basic reason that you can get leverage on your career other than other like participants that you may be competing with. And basic principles and basic reason why the categorization still stands and why principally and practically it justifies this thing, we believe that we're proud of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader of Opposition. Now we'll call for the Prime Minister. Take care.
We think that people that are already considerate, that already are probably likely to succeed in startups, have like actual like processes as like how they're going to get funding, like what kind of companies like they're going to like who they're going to hire, and like that kind of like calculation. But we think for those individuals, this narrative is kind of irrelevant because like already or like yeah. That's why this debate is actually about the people that do not have that kind of like clear processes, but actually just have a general view that I want to succeed in society, I want to get money, I want to get fame, I want to like ride in like good cars or that kind of thing. And that's the clear like people that this narrative targets, and we think that for those people, like failure in such startups is very, very likely, and that's the kind of situation we think that this narrative creates. So two things to talk about. Firstly, like how this narrative coerces individuals to like start up new companies, and like how it's practically harmful. Secondly, like even to some extent, like success rates go down and people do not start new companies, like why we prioritize like realistic or like traditional career paths. So firstly, in terms of like how this narrative like coerces individuals. So Prime Minister clearly told you a couple of things that like how this narrative coerces people. So three things. Firstly, he told you this narrative is quite likely to be like extremely glamorized in media, in books, in movies, like where like rich people like Jeff Bezos is like riding big cars next to a bunch of like beautiful women or that kind of thing. But we told you also that this kind of narrative is likely to come with people like individuals saying that I went through a lot of hardship and many people thought that I wouldn't succeed, but I succeeded anyways. We think that all people go through like certain hardship and criticism from people around them, but they like, and because of that, they in some cases thought that they were inadequate for those kinds of jobs. But all of these people that succeeded have that kind of experience of like going like I don't know, overcoming those kinds of like certain like hardships or criticism, and we say that because of that, all of these success cases are likely to come with the message that like you can also succeed, like because many people criticized me and thought that I couldn't succeed. So like maybe you don't think you can succeed now, but you can also succeed. Two, we say like in terms of the character of the like individuals that this narrative targets, this is particularly harmful. Firstly, we told you that obviously because these people are likely to be young, they do not have like much social experience and unlikely to make that kind of rational calculus. But two, that it specifically targets people that do not have a like clear plan for the future. because we think that people that have a clear plan for the future are not likely to look at certain like glamorized media, like books, or watch like Steve Jobs movies, or read Steve Jobs books, but are likely to likely to get like more practical information about how they're going to get funding from those kinds of individuals, or like how they're going to like create those companies and what kind of people they're going to hire. The impact of this impact of this narrative, we say, is in two things. Firstly, that these startups that these individuals are likely to fail. Obviously, because like statistically, like startups really are likely to fail, but also because like there's extreme competition between those kinds of startups, and there's always going to be winners and losers in those societies. We say the consequence of this is that once they fail, that they do not have like any like adequate skills to like enter other kinds of industries or like start new kinds of jobs, those kinds of things. So maybe they might say that they can realize that they don't have any talents and quit pretty easily. We think this is quite unlikely for two reasons. Firstly, because like once you start a startup company, you have to you have a reciprocal responsibility to the people that funded you, and you also have like extreme pride because you went against like your parents or your friends' will that telling you that you shouldn't start these kinds of startups. And we think that the individual is likely to continuously opt into those kinds of like startup situations until they can succeed. And we think that's particularly harmful because they can never ever opt out of those kinds of situations. But the second kind of impact we see is even if these individuals are likely to succeed, we think that job in and of it, like this startup in and of itself is extremely like stressful and hard. Because if you're like a CEO of a company, like you just have a bunch of like responsibilities and a bunch of time to work. Yeah, those kinds of things. So we think that in any case, the individual that is forced to do these startups suffer. I mean, we say that that's a situation that this kind of narrative creates. So what do we support? So we think three things. Firstly, we would actively discourage individuals from starting new companies, and we would tell them to I don't know, look at the reality and like go to med school, go to med school, or like go to like universities or that kind of thing. But two, we say that by doing so, that these individuals can prepare from an early age to those like realistic paths, like whether they are studying to go to med school or like whether they're like, I don't know, building up their like human connections from an early age. The impact of this is obvious, that people lead better lives because in many cases those are more like stable like careers or those kinds of things. But two, we say in these careers, individuals can find aspirations and human connections that we don't think is that much different from the happiness you can get from like succeeding in startups. So moving on. So the kind of secondly, about the trade-off we're willing to make. So O tells us that some people can make such rational calculus and succeed because like they can see objective, like they can calculate those kinds of things. In the first place, we preempted this by saying that people that are probably likely to succeed, like Steve Jobs or like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, obviously showed extreme talent from an early age, and that's why we think that those people are all still likely to start these kinds of companies. But two, they told us that this is a unique way to get attention. We say that that's not really unique because already like such attraction to these startups exists, whether it be money, whether it be fame, and we say that like such attraction through glamorization is not necessary to attract these people to start new companies. But even if we take them at their best and say like startups never happen under our side, we're willing to make that kind of trade-off because in the end of the day, that kind of utilitarian calculus exists. That if more people can like live better lives, stable lives, and have good connections, human connections in those kinds of careers, that is a like comparatively better situation that we want to support. For those reasons, we will propose.
Thank you. Any comment for a speech? I'll let call for the leader of opposition. Take care.
Narrative
just narrative. As long as narrative is just narrative, I think, because they don't have power, which makes people move on to one direction. As long as it just is in case of narrative, and that means, as my partner clearly said, that people won't make irrational choices, given the fact that this glamorization is just case of it is in just case of narratives. That means that even though that kind of glamorization has more successfully and it has power of the narrative itself, but it cannot make people push into the places where they have no alternative but to make some startup company in current society. And the second thing I doubted at the government side opinion is that their definition of succeed is a little bit vague, and I think even in status quo, start your career in traditional company have a lot of practical harm in your body or in your health or in your mental. So given the fact that there are a lot of harm of start your career in traditional company, what is success? I think this is very strong question. So my partner clearly told you that why principally this glamorization is justifiable. So I'm gonna give you precise analysis of more about practical things. I have raised two practical harm of people without this narrative in current situation. Before that, let me give you analysis of current society. First is about current society. We think compared to the past, we have a more diversity in current society. It applies in your value, or it applies on your preference of atmosphere or something like that. And secondly, traditional company analysis of traditional company. That means I think unlikely to be changed is most clarifiable analysis or character of the traditional company. And opposed to that, startup company is made from zero standpoint and can be made by own owner or startup person itself. So if you create some company and start up, you can make atmosphere of company very freely. So we think this is very beneficial to person. The first argument: why is it practically harmful to minority people? I think this minority doesn't only mean the race or religious or something like that. That meaning of the minority will apply in, for example, preference of atmosphere of workplace or something like that. For example, traditional company tends to be like very tough and very strict or something like that. And compared to that, if someone who likes the atmosphere atmosphere where the people can make their opinion very freely or something like that, that kind of startup company will be having such atmosphere. And this is very beneficial in current society. I clearly mentioned that very diversified. That is, for example, minority who have very different opinion from majority have no alternative before the emerging of this narrative, right? Because what they only can do is get into traditional company and be suited to that kind of company. And that company atmosphere, if the atmosphere were not suitable for that person will be clearly harmed, right? Because they cannot say something against very huge company and which has very big power or something like that. But after this emerging of narratives, the people have choices to start up company, right? And in that situation, you can control the atmosphere of company. So if you like to some certain atmosphere, your company will have such atmosphere in the current situation. And given the fact that the current society is very diversified, that kind of only the traditional company doesn't give you precise or very suitable atmosphere company for you, and that kind of minority people or like that will be very critically benefited from starting up new company for their own self, right? And it is clearly benefit to such people. And secondly, I'm gonna explain
that kind of movement of making starting up company is beneficial also to the majority of people, right? And move on to this argumentation. Government side told you the dangerousness of making starting a company. Yes, that may be true because there are a lot of number of example of failure or something like that. We accept, but even in traditional company making your career, you may fall. You may make fault in such process. There is no guarantee. It is not guaranteed that in traditional company you will completely succeed, right? The existence of possibility of unsuccessful is also exists in the traditional company, so we deny that premise in the first place. Here's how the majority of people will gonna be benefited from make startup company. First, in traditional company, you have to compete as a corporate people with starts from academic skills or academic record or payment or something like that. And in that situation, you are now in very harsh competition. And we don't think it is very good to person because it can cause very stressful life or something like that. And given the fact that a startup company is comparatively smaller than traditional company, and you are the owner, you are the decision maker of that company, you don't have to compete with something like that. So, and what I also want to say is that competition in company is unproductive, and we have to compete with some other company or something like that. We prefer the startup company, so we bet to oppose.
Thank you to the leader of opposition for the speech. Now I'd like to call the member of government. Here.
Opening government successfully told you why those kind of narrative is very harmful for individuals. However, firstly, they couldn't clarify what kind of people are suffering from those kind of narrative in the first place. And secondly, actually they couldn't explain why, as the government or media should not promote those kind of narrative in the first place peacefully. That is why in my extension, we have 3 extensions from closing government. Number 1, why society should not encourage people to start their own company in the first place, and what is the character of those kind of culture in the first place. Secondly, more practically, what kind of people will suffer from the difference from ideal style of business. And thirdly, we are to explain as the extension why those kind of narrative does make it difficult for people to start up their own company in the first place. Before moving on, we are to quickly read about what DLO said in previous speech. DLO says actually we can create a comfortable environment for company to, for example, communicate with other people who have the diversity. I have 2 responses. Number 1, actually, in current situation, also big company trying to have those kind of autonomy in the first place, right? Actually, communication with other different kinds of people is very important in order to create something, right? On the circumstances, it has nothing to do with those kind of culture in the first place. Secondly, more importantly, actually, when people actually their case is very limited in the first place. When people start up their own company, actually this employer can have those kind of atmosphere, good suitable atmosphere for employer, right? However, actually they have to hire other employee, too many employees, right? On the circumstances, those kind of employees cannot have comfortable environment. That is actually because those who start up those kind of business is one employer, right? On the circumstances, their argument doesn't stand. Moving on to my extension. First extension, why society should not enforce those kind of individuals to start up those kind of own their business in the first place. Actually, we have to characterize what kinds of culture are existing now and why it is happening right now. Three things to talk about. Number one, actually people, those kind of culture are rapidly and not gradually spreading in the society. Actually, because society is rapidly changing now because of technology or AI, actually nation or government want to catch up with those kind of changing. Actually, people those kind of government are strong incentive to use those kind of human resources, right? On the circumstances, because of those kind of rapidly widespreading spreading those kind of culture, actually a lot of people are suffering. Two things. Number one, actually, people who get traditional education and traditional culture are suffering from right now. Actually, even though society makes those kind of people educated in traditional way, actually those kind of people today have to suffer from those kind of culture which supports those kind of startup on their company, right? On the circumstances, it is very irresponsible for company to country to pressurize those kind of individuals to start up their company. Secondly, poor people or minority who do not receive contents of education of how to start up those kind of company are suffering from right now. Actually, those kind of poor people a school which provides those kind of education to start their own business. It tends to be, for example, private school or some kind of school who can have capacity or knowledge or know-how to educate those kind of things, right? On the circumstances, we strongly believe that minorities are suffering from right now. Secondly, actually, because government has strong incentive to enhance those kind of nation with those kind of human resources, actually, even though those kind of starting up and success is very remote possibility, they try to exaggerate those kinds of success rate of those kind of starting up in the first place. Thirdly, we strongly believe that government just try to put emphasis on importance of those kind of starting up, not how to start up in the first place, right? On the circumstances, we strongly believe the society should not pressurize individuals in that way. Why? What is the impact? Number one, actually, society is very unstable. Actually, just present criteria, present necessity of education, we strongly believe that we should not change those kind of stance of government rapidly in the first place. Secondly, actually, even though those kind of failure is dependent on government, we should not pressurize those kind of individuals in the first place. Moving on to the second issue, what kind of people are suffering from difference from ideal style of people in the first place? As we told you, those kind of poor or minority group are suffering from those kind of difference from ideal society of culture. That is exactly because they have to go to places in majority in order to get job or in order to start their business, right? On the circumstances, we strongly believe that under-student score is rather better. Why? Two reasons. Number one, actually under-student score, what is required to success is very clear and visible under the current situation, right? Actually, when we study harder and when we get high score on university education, actually we can get a better job, right? On the circumstances, because those kind of criteria is clear and visible, it is better for those kind of minority group. Secondly, actually, yes.
Why should the society be subjected to giving a clear standards what they believe as a right, rather than leaving the people to decide what is arbitrary for themselves?
We strongly believe that actually, even though society cannot answer the ratings and actually talking about impact, we strongly believe that actually under the score, actually today's system and those kind of narrative isn't much right now, right? On the circumstances, government or media or society should not pressurize those kind of individuals in the first place. Moving on to the last issue, why narrative rather makes it is difficult for people to start up their own business in the first place. First of all, I'd like to analyze how young people receive this kind of narrative in the first place. Actually, as this opening government trying to explain, because those young people is very irrational, they actually strongly believe those kind of young people receive those kind of narrative in their way. For example, actually people want to believe what they want to believe, right? And actually those kind of young people tend to have short-term policy, right? On the circumstances, we strongly believe that rather actually if government or society put priority on creativity in their education, those kind of young people, some young people try trying to receive those kind of messages as a message that actually we should not study, or we don't have to study anymore, we don't have to get knowledge, right? On that circumstances, even though creativity, basis of creativity is basic knowledge, we strongly believe that a lot of young people will rather disincentivized to study more, right? On the circumstances, those kind of studying up culture is rather make failure in the first place. That is why we strongly believe that society should not pressurize individuals in that way in order to see people who are suffering from failure of the government, not individual in the first place. So we are proud to propose this motion.
Thank you, member of government, for your speech. Now I would like to call the member of opposition. Here.
Thank you, Cheers. Before my speech, I want to caution the old debater. I want to one caution like that. The old debater and why our arguments are and our stance are more important and something like that will be explained by my partner because I have a lot of things to tell you and our extension. Okay, so now moving on my speech. So we need to encourage people, insist them to follow them dreams, and even if they, even if don't agree, it should not be a decision other than own. So if people want to stay traditional job, it is okay. But if they don't want to, it is a freedom choices, so it is okay. So they should be able to choose their future because this encouragement building businesses. Which today, and so the importance of the initiative encourage healthy competition amongst people, and starting up is not just limited to people who quit their jobs from traditional companies. In some cases, it's the only way for some people to succeed. We need to give them a choice. So that's why we oppose this motion. And today I have the three things to talk. Firstly, about the creativity, the pursuing your dreams, and the secondly about the academic importance that it is like the likelihood to improve our society if we don't take this motion, and thirdly about the after plan, so negative effect of discouraging. So now moving on to my first argument. So yeah. So the creativity and the pursuing your dream is one of the most important value of being human. And so like the essence of the life, it is like to be the happy and satisfied. That even if people are successful in their startup, why should they stick to regular traditional job if they are not happy? So for example, the people who want to start up but they can't because their parents say you should stick to regular traditional job because of money, because of family, and they continue their traditional regular job. But it is so sad things like thinking about their life, and even if they have the ability and the creativity, they can start up and they have to work or spend their time with their regular, like the eating dinner or taking the bus and sleeping night. They often think if I start up the company, maybe we will succeed, right? So so it is so sadness things for them. And other sadness, like the other harmful thing, is like that for society. So even if people have creativity and they have ability to start up, but they can't. Like for example, the thinking about Steve Jobs. So as I said, like if they don't start up, now we can't use a smartphone or PC or something like that. So to start up also gives us a lot of gifts and the pathway to your dreams gives the individuals and the society a lot of the great things, right? So yeah, then and next moving to our second point, the no, thank you. The academic impact, the likelihood to improve our society if we don't take this motion, and like the academic impact startup and culture. So thinking about the investment, like banks value venture culture and the equality, which is the no thank you business that invest in the startup because it is very profitable. So if the banks think the people ability to start up the great the company and improve our society, they easily support them. And the people who want to start up, of course, happy because easily to realize that their dream itself, and our society will be easily to improve society. No, thank you. Because people who won't start up easily to continue the marketing and R&D and investment and something like that. So we will get more convenient things, and our culture will our culture like please imagine about like that. So we don't imagine that who can imagine 10 years ago. Now we use the smartphone, but maybe 10 years ago, maybe no one can imagine like using smartphone like something like that. So the people who want to start up have the ability to make our culture and our confidence things, right? And moving to the third argument after the plan, our negative effect of the discouraging, and I have 2 points. The first is like that. So in college, it's really important thing, right? So thinking about those who want to start up, they have the heavy burden, like the 2 things. Like first, to feed their family and workers and something like that. So they have to think about the family and workers. So how to keep the company condition, and so and second, the likelihood to find a job if they bankrupt. So maybe it is so difficult to return the jobs. So it is too important. The people are easily to give up because of these reasons. So in college is really important. So second, about this college. So it is the hard to start up and continue and come up with idea if they are in this college. I have 2 things. First, thinking about please thinking about the debate. So it is really clear. So if you don't have any confidence, you won't win, right? Partly because you can't come up with the great idea and the best argument. So you will lose the debate tournament, and you tend to quit the debate, right? So it is the same of this. So the motivation is really important. And second, to the startup, it is so burden, as I mentioned. So it is easy to fail and bankrupt, right? If they have this college, as I mentioned. So for all these reasons, we are very happy to oppose.
Thank you, member of opposition. Now let's call on member
Thank you, adjudicators. My partner has talked about three things. Now, firstly, why the society and the government should not suddenly start to pressurize individuals in order to catch up with social trends. And secondly, what kind of people are suffering from right now, and why status quo is comparatively better right now. Thirdly, why this kind of narratives makes it difficult for the citizens to start making the startup companies. Those kind of things. Considering this point, firstly, I like to refute TD Crow's government in the first place. They said, like, in the introduction of their speech, they said it's like the freedom of, they're kind of talked about freedom of choice cases. Listen to everyone, it's not the kind of the freedom of choice, right? Because, in this debate, we should talk about how these narratives actually, do influence on the citizens, and this is not the kind of the freedom of choice, right? Because of this narrative, this kind of narrative that encourages the citizens to make the startup companies rather than pursuing the traditional career, that actually, in the past, actually, governments have different narratives actually, to go to the good educational institutions and good university and make your best in that company. Make your best in that university, and then you're actually go into the good big company that is the right thing. Actually, government actually tries to narrate in the past. However, suddenly, in order to follow the trend, in order to follow the social trends, and the government suddenly tries to change the narratives. Actually, force the citizens to go into making the startup companies. It's actually an irresponsible thing for the government to do that, right? Because why? There's two reasons. Because firstly, those access to the education to make the startup company is limited for the certain minority groups, i.e. the poor people and the people who live in the remote area of the city, right? Because and secondly, moreover, those criteria of the creativity is so ambiguous, right? Because since this criteria is ambiguous, it's so hard for the citizens to what to do with that. So it's so irresponsible thing for the government to force only a handful of the people actually get the access to those making the startup companies, and actually those making a startup company, in the process of the startup companies, there are lots of huge risks of being making the mistakes, and that are hugely impact on their lives. So we think this is not true. Secondly, everyone, they don't show us the actual career importance of this startup, right? Because they said like an innovation, kind of the smartphone, will likely to happen. However, is likely to happen, but we don't think so. In three ways, because those innovation is actually more likely to happen in the big corporations, right? Firstly, the ability, the people who are actually graduated from this good university, who have certain calculation ability, who have the creative idea, actually gather into one places. And secondly, an environmental factor, and they have actually connection with the university level, and actually they're actually following the trend. They actually have the state-of-the-art technology. And thirdly, the facility problems. Since they're corporations, they have large money. They have the better level than the startup companies. That's why, and thank you, there are benefits actually likely to happen in our side of the house, indeed. So that's the reason why their impact occurs in government does not stand at all. And before explaining to the comparison between the OO and CG, I'd like to emphasize our why our point is really important, and why we have to why our character is really important. Why do we have to prioritize our characterization, the poor and the minority, right? Because these narratives actually we think these narratives actually exacerbate the financial gap and financial disparity between the rich and poor and the people who live in the city area and other things, right? Because of this gap, because of this narrative, actually, even how, those glorification is such. For this glorification is such that depicts those startup companies as something really, really desirable. So for these reasons, and those startup companies, it can't be accessible and easily for those people. So for these reasons, we're very proud to protect those citizens. Before moving on, yes.
Once again, given that the most of the globalization is done by the private sector, as Movio put, why is the government legitimacy so important and relevant in this motion?
I'm sorry, can you repeat again?
Given that globalization we're dealing in this motion is more done by the private sector than the social level, why is your legitimacy the justification of the social responsibility so relevant to this motion?
We say, ladies and gentlemen, that this, kind of the disparity is a governmental failure. So that's why the government should not make, make against this, problems. That rather than government should, take their actions in order to solve this disparity, right? Because, unlike the, pursuing those, starting companies, unlike focusing on the ambiguous criteria of creativity, it is so, easy for them to pursue the career criteria of going into the good university and then going to the big corporations, right? So we think your point does not stand at all. Actually, the career, the opening a position is actually talked about the benefits of the atmosphere problems, but those startup companies is actually good environment for these workers to say freely. However, those benefits can happen in our side of the house as well, as the first speaker has explained to you. So we think, ladies and gentlemen, compared to the OG's contribution, we reverse the characterization. We prove to you the importance of addressing those character, and we say for these reasons we're very proud to propose.
Thank you, government, for your speech. Now I'd like to call for an opposition with Kei.
First of all, what an honor it is to compete in the semifinal. Now, the essence of being a human is to pursue their dreams no matter how ridiculous of an ambition. By regretting the encouragement of the startup culture, the government side infringes on the right of choice of these individuals, which we in the closing opposition side will fight for the rights and defend it. Moreover, in our side of the house, we are inclusive towards the people who want to keep their traditional jobs, and at the same time, we allow people to chase their dreams, however way they want. In addition, encouraging the startup culture will bring about economic gain and personal satisfaction, all of which bring more good than harm to society. Therefore, the case of the closing opposition stands. Before I move on to the issues of this round, let me first point out my rebuttals towards both sides of the government. So first of all, they talk about how glamorization misleads people, right? But we in the closing opposition side believe that glamorization is okay. As my partner talked about, the reason why we people glamorize such is because it's meant to encourage people to try. We need to entice people to try because oftentimes people are discouraged to try even before other people hear about what they have in mind, right? So we need to be able to encourage that, ladies and gentlemen, change the narrative and the status quo that, oh, just the idea of startup itself is a bad idea, even though you don't actually know what exactly they want to invest in, right? Next, they talk about how startups are likely to fail. But this idea is based on the assumption that the indicator of success is if it's only well-known, famous, or popular. But we need to give more credit to the startups that aren't well-known, but are making profit anyway. Their idea of success is so narrow, which is exactly the kind of mindset we are trying to change in society. Next, they say that, oh, let's actively encourage individuals to do anything, actively discourage individuals to do anything startup related, right? And go to something like, I don't know, medical school. But this means that they are denying the successes of startup culture and are straying from the motion which asks whether or not to regret it. But okay, let's engage. As my partner explained, some of the best business ventures in the world are ideas that emerge from startup ideas, like my very beloved Uber Eats and what have you, right? So let's talk about what the closing government side has been arguing. So they're like, oh, you know what? It's not about the freedom of choice. It's about how this influences citizens at the end of the day. But we believe that it does boil down to choice, though, whether or not to go into the startup culture, right? And that their entire narrative is that, oh, we shouldn't be able to do it. You guys shouldn't because it's a failure at the end of the day. But we on the other side believe that, no, you know what? Whether or not you fail, just do it. I think it's okay, and we need to be able to change that mindset, right? Next, let's talk about how they said that the criteria of creativity is very ambiguous, right? But even worse is government side's criteria for what shouldn't be done, aka the startup culture, based solely on the fear of failing. No, thank you. At least in our model, we provide leeway for people to even consider what to do, which brings about creativity, rather than shutting down the idea right there and then. So let's move on to the 4 contentions of this general debate, right? So the first contention I found was the question of success, or the difficulty of startups. No, thank you. Next, the question of choice. And then the next thing is, what can we get out of it exactly? And a comparison of models between both the government bench and the opposition bench. So let's first start with the question of success and the difficulty of startups. So what have they been saying exactly? Oh, we're trying to protect people from failing. But in closing opposition side, we made it clear that we are bound to fail even if we aren't in a startup, right? In a traditional work setting, people aren't guaranteed to succeed in these things because what if they're not fit for the job, or so many other reasons, right? Just because you're part of a regular employment system or what have you, doesn't mean that you're not bound to fail. People get fired, whether or not they even know that they're about to get fired, right? And these things still happen, so there's not actually any tangible safetiness in that scenario. Therefore, I think we take this issue because, you know what, we're okay, we're gonna embrace failure. At least we're giving people a choice on what to do with their lives, and they wouldn't be stuck doing a 24-hour job, or I don't know, maybe like a long-ass job, for whatever it is that they're up to, right? Like the people in Shibuya who are so miserable, who work overtime, ladies and gentlemen. So we want to be able to give people a choice and a way out of that. Next, let's talk about the question of choice, right? So the government side repeatedly argued, oh, let's prevent them from making this choice even before finding out what exactly they want to bring up, right? But like I said earlier, this is precisely the problem with status quo. They're against simply the idea of straying from the norm instead of the ideas brought upon. So they don't actually have any criteria for success. They'd rather just like stop your idea before even realizing, oh, maybe this person can bring a valuable contribution, what have you. So we think this is highly problematic because if they continue to perpetuate this, then people shouldn't try new things at all, period, right? And we need to be able to encourage people to do so because how else would we progress in society if we don't encourage this newness and the enhancement of ideas, ladies and gentlemen? So it's really not just about that. It's really more so the fact that people need to be able to try new things and we shouldn't stop them from doing so, and more importantly, not scare them from doing so, right? And then the next point is, what's better, the traditional path or the startup path? They talk a lot about how the traditional path is a safer choice, but let me explain to you. What the government side assumes is that forcing a traditional path of career is a safety net for society, but what they aren't understanding is that discouraging these people from pursuing their dreams is actually a hindrance to the success. In our model, we allow these people for a chance to succeed, right? And this chance to succeed is very important, ladies and gentlemen, because at the end of the day, these people, whether or not they're able to actually do so, need to be able to take a chance on themselves. And like I said earlier, if we're going to be an obstacle to that, if we're going to repeatedly discourage them from actually doing so, then it's highly problematic. Now, let's talk about the last thing, which is the comparison of the model of the government side and the opposition side, right? So the government side has repeatedly talked about how, oh, you know what, we need to be able to monitor this and that let's intervene whenever it's necessary because these people need to stop from failing right from the get-go, right? But then we can't actually do that. In what reality is it even feasible to stop people from failing from the very beginning when you can't exactly predict? We're actually giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? And we see that that's really important here because the benefit of the doubt makes all the difference on how they progress. Like we mentioned earlier, some of the best business ventures we recognize in society today come from startup ideas that people once thought weren't actually good ideas, right? And like the example we mentioned about venture capital and growth equity with investment banks, one of the reasons why such powerful and financially wealthy institutions invest in such is because they see a potential in it. And for as long as we're able to see a potential in it, it's able to bring about a lot of economic growth, but also confidence within one's person that, oh, you know what, like I'm able to do this, right? So this chance to succeed is exclusive to the closing opposition side. And for all of these reasons, we believe that the closing opposition side takes this space. Thank you.